I can truly say that with the Tomb Raider game, it really was one of my favourites as soon as I picked up the controller. The immersive and twisty levels with so many heights and pitfalls, as well as some absolutely stunning locales, well, at least for me, it just captured my imagination. Now, I was playing all of this on my original PS1 and had no idea that Sega had a Saturn, let alone how that console was related to the history of one of my favourite games of all time. It was really kind of, I suppose you could argue, on the Mega CD that this all started. Core Design were big supporters of the Mega CD, and unlike many companies who developed for the machine, they actually sort of bothered putting some good non-FMV games on the console. One of the most prominent of these being Thunderhawk, with Pretty Mode 7 but better graphics, which, when combined with the vast number of levels available to play due to the CD-ROM format, really showed off the power of the Mega CD. Having such good ties with Sega meant that when their newest title, Tomb Raider, came into being and began development, they offered a certain level of exclusivity for the title. But if it wasn't for some certain interventions, this could have been a very different game. Originally, the game was going to feature a male protagonist, kinda like Indiana Jones, but to avoid association that would undoubtedly follow if they did so, Core changed it to a lady, Laura Cruz, a Latin American señorita. However, Core wanted to reflect their British genesis, so they decided to pick a very aristocratic new protagonist. Enter Lara Croft, upper-class British adventurer who used her dual-wield pistols and extravagant acrobatics to raid tombs in search of fortune and glory. Or, something like that anyway. As I've been playing the PlayStation version for so long, and given my new discovery and love of the Sega Saturn, plus the request from Ali of YTS and TVF production fame, two excellent channels I would recommend checking out by the way, I decided to take on the game and give it the review. One of the biggest challenges I faced at first was adapting to the new control scheme of the Sega Saturn, as opposed to the PlayStation. Having 6 buttons and only 2 triggers made things a little bit more confusing, meaning I often had a lot of mistakes, and on a level I know like the back of my hand. In the PlayStation version, triangle selects weapons, square is your main jump, X is action, and circle your spin button, where you flip from one to the other. The R1 and L1 buttons shuffle you sideways, and the 2 is your walk button, and your look button are the other 2 button on the control pad. Whereas the shuffle buttons are X and Z on the Saturn, and that took a lot of getting used to. Y gets your guns out. No, I don't mean those guns. B replaces square, etc, etc. It's not horrendously different, but it did take a wee bit of getting used to. Although that's not really down to the fault of the Saturn or the PlayStation, really. Graphically, there's very little difference between the two versions, although the option to change gamma levels for some reason or another isn't included in the Saturn version, which is kind of irritating, as there were some times in my playthrough that it would have been useful. I did notice that while there were more times when the PlayStation version suffered the dreaded slowdown, and with the Saturn's capacity for 20,000 more polys on the screen at once, that's not really very surprising. But when the Saturn version slows down, it really slows down, and it's horrifically noticeable, and as the frame rate plummets down quicker than Lara Croft falling off St. Francis Folly. And that feels like a very, very relevant comment to me, by the way. It happens a lot. But when they aren't slowing down, the locales really are certainly something to behold, and despite the dated graphics, there's a certain charm that feels like ancient ruins more than any Uncharted, or even new Tomb Raider for that matter, seems to be able to achieve. And the various different levels are truly brilliant examples of what stunning level design can do for a game, tricky though these levels can often be. This really is one of the first generation games of the generation that really showed what these new consoles, the Saturn, the PlayStation, and a bit later on the N64, were really capable of doing. It's the same for every Tomb Raider, but there are some devious puzzles in here. The puzzle solving is the biggest part of the game, trying to find the keys to open doors a la Doom. However, unlike Doom, this is done in a far more refreshing manner rather than just collecting key cards. You can go about making cool jumps, pushing and pulling blocks, using switches. The style doesn't change radically per level, but the manner of execution keeps us from getting old. Level-wise, there is certainly enough to keep you busy, and my dad was playing it about 2 years before he beat it. It can get frustrating at times. Try not to resort to looking at the books or online guides unless you've been stuck for absolutely ages, because you would be doing the game a massive disservice. The sheer variety is also fantastic, as you range through 4 different styles of level. First an ancient sort of Mayan type level, then Roman, Egyptian and Atlantis to wrap it all up. So overall, I guess Tomb Raider on Sega Saturn is very much a recommended game from me. I mean, did we really expect much else? I'll admit it's one of my games that the nostalgia goggles kind of do get in the way very, very much. But it doesn't really matter whether you're playing it on PlayStation or on Saturn. Either way, it's a fantastic game. And it's cheap on pretty much both platforms as is. I think the game's final verdict has to be a timeless classic, really. I mean, for me, the graphical style doesn't matter no matter what it is. And despite the fact that it's a game that I kind of get frustrated with often because of the way it plays, I still come back to it time and time and time again, and I still have an absolute blast with it. And if you like the review, then hopefully you will too if you check the game out. So I'll see you guys in the next one. You take it easy. Thank you very much for watching this review, and I'll see you in the next one.